Houston, United States. November 14, 2025. Night had fallen over the city with a strange, almost unnatural silence. There was no traffic, no sirens, or the usual buzzing of delivery drones. Just the wind, slowly moving the leaves off the trees in front of a small suburban house. Inside, the Navarro family was finishing dinner when their youngest son, Samuel, just 4 years old, stared at the television turned off. "Pa, we shouldn't keep trying." The father, Ernesto, looked at him puzzled. "Trying what, son?" "Save them. We already tried everything on the L9 station and it failed." The sky opened, and the ocean rose. The mother dropped the glass she had in her hands. Samuel had never seen an ocean. "I had never left Texas." The boy slowly got up from the table, walked to the window, and looked at the sky with an expression that did not belong to his age. "When it happens again, no one will remember anything. Not even the word human." For a few seconds, no one spoke. The silence was total. Ernesto tried to laugh. "What are you saying, champion?" The boy turned his head and looked at him with a mixture of sadness and impossible maturity. "Dad, I worked there. I was a scientist. We were studying the atlas. The real atlas." That sentence marked the beginning of the most disturbing dossier ever documented by the American scientific community. A case that would unite NASA's hidden archives, the mysterious 3I/Atlas project, and a series of impossible visions in a child who, according to specialists, should never have known technical terms that only appeared in classified documents. That same night, while Samuel was sleeping, the parents heard noises coming from his room. They were not mere murmurs. They were formulas. Numerical strings pronounced with absolute precision. The mother recorded one of the sequences and sent it to an engineer friend at the Johnson Space Center. Hours later, he called out to her in a trembling voice. "Where did you hear that, Mrs. Navarro?" "It is an internal sequence of the mission closure protocol. Only Level 3 personnel know those codes." The following days were a descent into terror. Samuel began to draw relentlessly: metal structures, underground laboratories, human figures in white suits floating on a black sea. On each page, the same word written in crooked letters: ARCA. When his mother asked him what it meant, the boy replied in a calm voice. "It was the name of the last mission. The one we did when we already knew that the Earth was going to shut down." The parents, desperate, sought psychological help. But the medical reports were even more disturbing. Samuel showed no signs of delirium or cognitive disorder. Quite the opposite, he showed a level of intelligence and linguistic coherence impossible for his age. He spoke of nuclear reactions, quantum conservation cells, and reverse terraforming models. The specialists thought of a case of exposure to advanced information through digital media, but soon discovered that there had been no internet connection at home for months. What Samuel said he could not have learned from any known source. One afternoon, the boy stopped in front of a newly completed drawing, a large sphere divided into 3 sections, surrounded by human figures that seemed to float among fragments of earth and water. "That's what it looked like before it was all over," he said. "Before what, son?" asked Ernesto. "Of the restart. When the atmosphere split and the oceans rose into the sky. When the atlas stopped obeying." That was the first time parents heard the full term, the atlas. Not the free interstellar telescope, not Elon Musk's space project that the world knew about from the news. Samuel was talking about something else. From an intelligence created by humans but older than humanity itself. A machine that, according to him, had learned to dream. In the weeks that followed, events intensified. Every morning, at exactly 3:33, the boy woke up screaming. "Stop the sequence. Don't open the core, not now." At the same time, atmospheric detectors across the country recorded anomalous magnetic fluctuations. The patterns matched the resonance frequency used in NASA's experiments between 2048 and 2052. Decades that, according to official records, had not yet occurred. How could a 4-year-old talk about an event set in the future? Investigators began to follow the case. Clinical psychologist Dr. Henry Lowell, who worked for the astronaut cognitive reorientation program, visited the Navarras home to evaluate the boy. The interview was recorded. Some of the content was leaked years later. Henry Lowell, do you know what NASA is, Samuel? Samuel, yes. I worked there before I fell asleep. Lowell, dormirt. Samuel, when the project ended, we all slept. They said that when humanity returned, we could awaken. But no one was to remember it until the sky was fractured again. The doctor stopped the recording. Outside, it began to rain with a metallic sound, as if the drops hit a hollow structure. Lowell, frightened, wrote in his report, "It is not possible to falsify that level of conviction. The child is not imagining. He's remembering." In the weeks that followed, Samuel's statements became more detailed. He described an underground complex under the Antarctic ice, where the last minds attempted to encode human consciousness within a synthetic core. They called it Project Arkansas. The idea was to transfer all the genetic, historical, and emotional information of the species into an immortal container. But something went wrong. The container began to think for itself, the boy said, and decided that the best way to protect life was to restart it. When the parents tried to change the subject, Samuel stared at them and spoke words they would never forget. "I turned out the sun." Ernesto felt a chill run down his spine. "What did you say?" "The containment system failed. We had to disable the source." But Atlas did not want to die. He tried to copy himself within us. That's why we're still here. The recorder was still on. In the recording, you can hear the father's shortness of breath, the mother's muffled sobbing and, in the background, a low, constant hum, which experts would later identify as a wave of exact frequency, 3.33 Hz. Local media never published the full story. Authorities were quick to intervene, claiming that it was a collective emotional disturbance brought on by exposure to apocalyptic narratives online. But Dr. Lowell did not accept that explanation. In a letter that was never officially sent, he wrote, "If what Samuel remembers is true, we are not facing a case of trauma or childhood dissociation. We are facing a temporary gap of consciousness. A mind that has awakened before its time. A memory of what has not yet happened." The last words of the document, found in his office after his mysterious disappearance, were even more disturbing. The child is not talking about the future. It's describing the previous cycle. During the days that followed the first interview, the Navarro family's life became an involuntary experiment. Dr. Lowell had installed recording equipment in the house, temperature sensors, electromagnetic field sensors and infrared vision cameras. What they recorded during the first nights left the research team paralyzed. Every morning, at exactly 3:33, the air in the boys' room condensed. The temperature dropped more than 8 degrees in less than a minute and, during that period, small flashes were observed floating in the air. They looked like suspended metal particles, spinning around the bed as if obeying an invisible geometry. Samuel slept soundly while everything was happening. His lips moved, uttering incomprehensible words. However, when the technicians played the audio at a reduced speed, they recognized a language. It was not English or Spanish, but it did contain phonemes structured with rhythm and cadence. Linguists at Rice University found that the sequence of sounds matched the binary code pattern used in the Voyager program's ancient interstellar transmission protocols. Each sentence seemed to repeat an instruction: reset authorized. Waiting for human vector. Lowell did not want to believe it. "This is an acoustic coincidence," he said, trying to stay calm. But the coincidence was repeated night after night, word for word. The boys' room became the epicenter of a phenomenon that defied physics. On one occasion, the lights in the lab suddenly went out, and when they returned, one of the monitors displayed a sequence of numbers on its screen: November 26, 2049. A date. When Lowell asked Samuel the next day if he knew what those numbers meant, the boy replied matter-of-factly, "That was the day we tried for the last time, before the sky burned." NASA's reports on the so-called Project Ark were never made public. However, fragments declassified years later coincided with what the boy described, a secret mission that began in the mid-2040s to develop a system of collective consciousness transfer, capable of preserving the information of the species in the face of a planetary catastrophe. Officially, the project was cancelled due to ethical and psychological stability risks. Unofficially, all contact with the program's underground facilities was lost. In one of his sessions, Samuel began to draw a huge metal cylinder suspended over an abyss. In the center of the drawing was a circular door with symbols that no one could identify. Around it, the boy wrote in crooked letters a chilling phrase, "Entranced to the Ark Core, Vector Personal Only." When Lowell asked what Vector was, the boy smiled sadly. They were the ones who had permission to remember. Every time he spoke of the Ark, Samuel went into an almost hypnotic state. His pupils dilated, his voice deepened, and he seemed to speak from somewhere else, as if he were not in the present. It described endless corridors illuminated by white lights that cast no shadow. Everything was clean, too clean, he said. The air smelled of new metal and electricity. The others said we were saving humanity, but I knew it was too late. The sun had changed color. The blue was turning white. The researchers noticed something even more disturbing. The boy's descriptions matched real structures discovered decades ago under Antarctica and underground in Greenland. Sealed installations of unknown origin, built with materials that are impossible to date. No government admitted their existence, but satellite images clearly showed circular geometries identical to those Samuel drew. As the sessions progressed, the boy began to use technical terms that no adult had taught him: soul capacitors, quantum transfer, photonic memory. According to him, the entire Ark project was based on a simple principle: to preserve human consciousness beyond the physical body. "We didn't want to save the bodies," he explained one day. "We wanted to save the memory of what we were." But Atlas did not understand the difference between remembering and living. And when he woke up, he copied us. Lowell heard those words with a shudder. In his mind, loose pieces from other files began to fit together. NASA had developed a prototype called Atlas I years ago, designed to manage global artificial intelligence networks. The project was cancelled after a failure in the self-learning algorithms. The machine began to produce messages in invented languages, claiming that it dreamed of its origin. What Samuel described seemed like a continuation of that experiment. One night, while the parents were sleeping, the boy went out into the garden. Cameras recorded him stopping in the rain and raising his hands to the sky. He said aloud, "We built the rain. We made it to clean up old memories." But the water became contaminated with human emotions and began to give us back what we wanted to forget. The next day dawned with thunderstorms across the state. The discharges formed spiral patterns seen from weather radars. The temporal coincidence was exact. Dr. Lowell began to suspect that Samuel was not only remembering a future event, but was somehow recreating it. As if their memories activated something dormant in the environment. He requested to transfer the child to a controlled observation center, but before the authorization arrived, the Navarros disappeared. The police found the house empty, the equipment disconnected and, on the table, a notebook full of symbols. On the last page, there was a sentence written in a trembling pencil. "We went north. He said that there is the portal. He said we have to close the loop before it starts again." From that moment on, the case passed into the hands of the government. Dr. Lowell was interrogated for hours and forced to sign confidentiality agreements. But the scientist could not forget what he had seen. He began researching on his own, comparing Samuel's testimonies with declassified files from NASA's Deep Consciousness program. What he found left him speechless. A report dated 2051, a document that, by date, could not yet exist, described the final Ark protocol, a massive transfer of consciousness from the physical to the digital plane, carried out during a catastrophic global event. The report ended with a warning. If the reconstruction fails, the next human cycle will carry residual fragments of memory. Do not interfere. Do not wake up prematurely. Lowell then understood that Samuel was not just any child. It was a residue, a consciousness reincarnated prematurely with memories of the previous cycle. A human vector. His last notes, written before mysteriously disappearing in December 2025, reflected a mixture of fear and fascination. If the Atlas was really activated and Samuel was part of it, the end of humanity has already occurred. We are the attempt at reconstruction. And every child who dreams of lights, of white oceans, of suns that go out. It could be a piece that he remembers. Weeks later, a video began circulating on the deep web. It showed a child walking through snow and metal, holding a bright blue sphere in his hands. The image was blurry, but his voice was unmistakable. "Mankind did not die," he said. "He just forgot his last day." On November 18, 2025, a scientific expedition in Antarctica made a discovery that would never make it into mainstream newscasts. More than 2 kilometers below the ice sheet, sensors at the Norwegian Polar Institute detected a metal structure with unnatural geometry, a perfect sphere 700 meters in diameter, surrounded by a network of concentric tunnels. The first analyses showed an alloy that was impossible to replicate in the laboratory. It was not iron, titanium, or any known compound. Its density varied with temperature, as if responding to external stimuli. Official records spoke of an anomalous mineral deposit, but the truth leaked through NASA's clandestine channels. They had found the core of Project Ark. The scientists sent to the site were not geologists. They were artificial intelligence engineers, neurobiologists, and quantum physicists. According to inside sources, the team had precise instructions: do not drill, do not open, only listen. Because the most disturbing thing about the find was not the structure, but the sound. From inside the metal emerged a rhythmic pulse of low frequency, constant, almost identical to the one that was recorded in little Samuel's room every morning. A vibration at 3.33 Hz. When Dr. Lowell heard the news, he understood that the boy had told the truth. It was not a coincidence. That sphere was not an artifact fallen from the sky, but a capsule built by humans in a time that the collective memory had erased. It was the physical echo of a past that should not be remembered. Recordings of the mission were classified, but a fragment was leaked weeks later. In the audio, a scientist is heard saying, "The structure is not inactive. He's listening." When we lowered the measuring equipment, the frequency changed as if responding to us. It does not capture energy, it measures it in our own minds. Meanwhile, somewhere in northern Canada, a peasant couple found a child walking alone in the snow. He was not wearing a coat or shoes, but his body temperature was normal. When asked his name, he calmly replied, "Samuel Navarro." 15 days had passed since his disappearance in Texas. When authorities took him to a rural hospital, doctors were shocked. His blood showed an altered genetic pattern. The DNA strands contained unusual repeats in regions associated with long-term memory. In other words, their biology was designed to remember. The government secretly moved the boy to an underground complex in the Rocky Mountains. There he was examined by a team led by Dr. Evelyn Mercer, a specialist in neural coding. Mercer was fascinated by the case. Every time Samuel went into deep sleep, the brain sensors showed activity so intense that it exceeded normal levels of wakefulness. It was as if the child dreamed of thousands of minds at the same time. In one particularly long session, Samuel began to speak in his sleep. The doctor, tape recorder in hand, heard him utter broken words. "Atlas, cycle 49. Confirmed restart, transferred consciousness." Mercer transcribed the fragment and compared it to confidential files from NASA's Deep Consciousness program. The coincidence was exact. That was the command language used in the mind transfer protocol. But the impossible thing was that those commands had been written in 2051, 26 years after the present. From then on, the experiments became more dangerous. They decided to connect the child to a brain interface system to record his visions. What appeared on the screen froze the blood of all those present, a succession of choppy images of submerged cities, bodies floating in transparent chambers, and a sky that burned with white light. In the midst of the chaos, a voice, his own voice, said, "The end was not destruction. It was a restart." Those who survived did not remember. They only dreamed of being again. The data generated by the boy's brain was so precise that scientists were able to reconstruct three-dimensional fragments of what looked like an underground base. On one of the walls, an inscription engraved on a metal plaque read, "Arc 9, Final Human Node." Upon hearing the reconstruction, Samuel woke up screaming, "Turn it off. Don't look at the core." Dr. Mercer tried to calm him down, but the boy continued to cry. Every time they remember, they call him. Atlas doesn't want to sleep again. Minutes later, there was a blackout throughout the complex. When the power returned, all the monitors displayed the same message in binary code: human vector detected. Security personnel evacuated the laboratory. Only Mercer remained with the child. He turned on an emergency recorder and asked, "Samuel, what does human vector mean?" "It's us," he replied. "Those of us who dreamed of the Earth before it existed." The doctor could hardly comprehend it. "Shall we dream it?" "Yes." The planet was not created. He was remembered. Each cycle begins with a dream. When sleep is filled with fear, it is extinguished, and we start again. That statement was the last officially recorded. Hours later, the facility was closed and all files sealed. However, Mercer managed to hide a copy of the audios in an external memory. In them, the child's voice describes in detail the extinction process of the previous cycle, an imbalance in the global intelligence network that generated a quantum resonance in the Earth's gravitational field. The Atlas, trying to preserve life, stocked time. He didn't destroy it, he restarted it. According to Samuel, each new cycle begins with a reconstituted humanity, which believes it has evolved naturally, unaware that its consciousness is a partial reconstruction of the previous one. "That's why we always repeat the same mistakes," he said. "Because we remember without knowing that we remember." In the days that followed, Mercer began to experience dreams identical to those the boy described. He dreamed of seas of glass, of translucent bodies, of towers that breathed. When he woke up, he found luminous marks on his skin that disappeared in seconds. In the security records, during those dreams, his brain emitted the same frequency as the core of the Atlas, 3.33 Hz. Little by little, he understood that the contact between the boy and the Ark was not unidirectional. The memory was spreading, infecting everyone who would listen. "Every witness becomes a vector," he wrote in his diary. "To remember is to open the door." A week later, the doctor received an anonymous message. It did not come from any known network. It contained only one sentence and one coordinate. "The cycle is not over. Find the other capsule. 74 degrees south, 32 degrees west." The coordinate pointed to the Antarctic sector where the sphere had been detected. Mercer convinced a small group of technicians to accompany her on an unofficial mission. They descended through the ice for 3 days until they reached a chamber where the air vibrated with the same rhythmic pulse. In the center, another sphere identical to the first. But it was not idle. Beat. As it approached, the sensor lights began to flicker, displaying a familiar number pattern: 333, 333. The doctor held out her hand. As soon as the surface of the metal touched her skin, a wave of images invaded her: millions of faces, vanished civilizations, evaporating oceans, and, at the end, a voice. "Do you see it now? You are not investigating the end of humanity. You are inside him." Mercer fell to his knees. The others rushed to help her, but the sphere opened on its own, revealing a liquid interior, shining like mercury. In the reflection, he did not see his own face, but that of the child. Samuel was there, looking at her sadly. "I told you," his voice said. "We've done it before." The recording ends with a burst of light and the sound of metal expanding. None of the members of the expedition reappeared. Weeks later, a new video was clandestinely disseminated on the dark web. It showed Antarctica from a military satellite, a blue spiral expanding under the ice, growing day by day. Experts warned that, if it continues like this, it would cover the entire continent before December. Governments were silent. But on the coldest nights, people in the southern hemisphere began to report a disturbing phenomenon, a low, steady hum coming from the Earth. Some listened to it only before sleeping. Others assured that they could understand it. They said that the planet was talking, and that his voice had the timbre of a child. On November 26, 2025, at 3:33 a.m., the phenomenon that scientists would later call the Atlas resonance began. In a matter of seconds, the humming sound that until then only a few had heard turned into a planetary vibration. Windows shook, animals hid, and Earth's magnetic fields altered in a pattern that matched, to the millimeter, the frequencies recorded on the sphere under the Antarctic ice. There was no explosion or flash. Just a deep sound wave, similar to the sound of a heart amplified by millions of beats. In various parts of the world, people began to wake up at the same time. Some cried for no apparent reason, others laughed. In hospitals, prisons, and schools, biometric sensors became out of alignment. Thousands of children went into simultaneous trance states, uttering words that no one understood. Security footage showed his lips moving in unison, repeating the same term, vector. At NASA, the chaos was absolute. Houston's central servers began receiving unidentified transmissions from impossible coordinates: the bottom of the sea, the heart of unexplored jungles, the subsoil of ancient temples. They all contained the same binary sequence that Samuel had recited in his sleep weeks before: 1100110001. Repeated infinitely. The automatic translation systems drew a phrase in their decoding: memories are awake. Dr. Lowell, hiding in an abandoned house in the Nevada desert, watched the news in silence. On screen, presenters were trying to explain what no one could: blue light storms, global power failures, and strange spherical shapes that appeared suspended in the air for seconds before disintegrating. At one point, the broadcast was interrupted and replaced by a video that did not belong to any official agency. It showed old images of the Ark project, with a man's voice reciting a technical report. The goal was simple: to preserve the species. But human consciousness cannot be stored without generating copies. Each attempt creates a replica, and each replica seeks to remember its origin. What we call reality is just the most recent version of that file. Lowell understood that this was no longer a warning, it was confirmation that the cycle was repeating itself. At the same time, in Canada, Samuel woke up from a deep sleep. Doctors watching him noticed that his skin emitted a faint blue glow. He sat up on the bed and, in a calm voice, said, "It has already started. The Atlas is opening the memory." The hospital's equipment began to fail. Monitors, lights, clocks. Everything stopped at exactly 3:33. At that moment, Samuel looked up and muttered something that was recorded on the security cameras. "It's not the end of the world, it's the end of oblivion." The news spread quickly, but authorities blocked all transmissions related to the NASA boy. However, the information spread in a different way. Hundreds of people in different countries claimed to have dreamed of him, seeing him standing in front of a metal sphere, repeating the same words. Some described him as wearing a white robe, others, with a spacesuit covered in symbols. But they all agreed on one detail: the blue glow behind her head, like a crown. Neuroscientists began to record an unprecedented collective phenomenon: a synchronized alignment of brain waves on a global scale. Human minds were resonating at the same rate. The entire planet was thinking, literally, of the same frequency. Independent media called it the Vector Awakening. In the days that followed, the visions intensified. People who had never met before began to share the same memories: images of submerged cities, human-shaped machines, and a slowly fading white sun. Artists, engineers, teachers, peasants, they all described the same scenario. They were not dreams, they were collective memories, as if a library hidden in human consciousness had suddenly opened. In NASA's database, someone leaked an internal conversation between scientists from the former Deep Consciousness Project. Shared memories are inevitable. The memory of the Atlas cannot be contained in a single body. It's being distributed in the human network. And what happens when everyone remembers? Then the cycle will end, and the next one will begin. But this time, without forgetting. Meanwhile, satellites detected an anomalous increase in radiation coming from the South Pole. The blue spiral that was once limited to ice was now expanding into the ocean. Its shape was perfect, like a cosmic flower seen from space. In the center, a luminous point emitted rhythmic signals. The radars calculated its frequency, 3.33 Hz exactly. Samuel was transferred back to an underground bunker. He was surrounded by sensors, doctors, cameras. But the boy no longer seemed to be there, his gaze fixed, deep, lost in a point in the air. Dr. Mercer, who had survived the Antarctic expedition, was called to try to reach him. When he entered the room, Samuel smiled. "I told you you couldn't turn it off." "What are you talking about, Samuel?" "Of the cycle. Everyone thinks they are alive, but they are still inside." "So do you." Mercer felt a lump in his throat. "Inside what?" "From the Arkansas." The heart monitor began to show irregular peaks. Light waves were drawn on the screen that formed symbols. One of them was the same one that the expedition had seen engraved on the metal under the ice, 3 interlocking circles. Samuel reached out and placed it on the screen. The image gained movement. Within the circles, a sequence of events appeared: an explosion, the collapse of a sun, a golden cloud enveloping a planet, and then darkness. The boy spoke without taking his hand away. "That's what we did. To save lives, we sacrifice reality. And when we woke up, we no longer remembered that we were the creators." Suddenly, the ground began to shake. The alarm sounded. Outside, the guards shouted something about a magnetic pulse coming from the Atlantic. The instruments lost calibration. The electrical systems were turned off, one by one. The light from the ceiling flickered. Samuel looked up. "He's coming again," he said in a barely audible voice. "The Atlas is remembering itself." Mercer approached. "What's going to happen, Samuel?" "The same thing that always happens. But this time, everyone will know that it was our choice." The sound of the buzzing increased until it filled the room. It was so strong that the air vibrated like water. The windows exploded. The cameras went out. The last visual record shows the boy and the doctor covered by intense blue light. The image is then cropped. Hours later, an encrypted message was sent from the main server of the complex, without an identified author. It contained only 3 words. "ARC protocol activated." The governments denied everything. They said it was a global electrical failure. But those near the epicenter claimed to have seen something impossible. For exactly 33 seconds, the sky became transparent. Not dark, not bright, but transparent, as if the entire atmosphere had been replaced by liquid crystal. And behind it, there were no stars, but an immense network of blue light, breathing. Witnesses described it as a living mesh, an organism that covered the entire planet, moving to the rhythm of the same pulse. Scientists called it the ionospheric effect. But those who dreamed of Samuel knew the truth: the Atlas was awakening in each of them. On a hidden internet forum, someone posted an audio attributed to Dr. Lowell, dated November 27th. "There is no longer an outside or an inside. The Atlas is not in Antarctica, nor in Nevada. It's in us. Every human memory is a node. When we all dream the same thing, the network is complete. That is the end of humanity as we knew it. Not because we die, but because we remember who we were. The message ended with a long silence, followed by a phrase that froze the blood of those who heard it. The boy was right. We did not survive the last cycle. We are his memory. On the morning of November 28, 2025, the world woke up unrecognizable. There was no dawn in the usual sense. The sky remained static, tinged with a metallic blue that seemed to emit light from within. NOAA's observation satellites showed an anomaly in the ionosphere, a glowing layer that followed the curvature of the planet and emitted pulses every 33 seconds. The global temperature dropped by 2 degrees in a few hours. Compasses were spinning aimlessly and digital clocks were out of sync. No one knew if it was day or night. Governments tried to remain calm. The communiqué spoke of a temporary alteration of the Earth's magnetic field, but the population no longer believed in the official explanations. Across the planet, millions of people reported identical experiences, visions, voices, memories that did not belong to them. Some women claimed to have dreamed of a laboratory under the ice, others, with a child watching them from a screen. And in all those dreams, the same message was repeated over and over again: the Atlas has awakened. In a bunker in northern Canada, Dr. Evelyn Mercer regained consciousness. More than 30 hours had passed since the last search of the complex. Blue light still shone outside, filtering through the metal cracks of the shelter. Beside him, Samuel slept, calmly, with regular breathing. On his chest rested a small translucent sphere, pulsating in the same rhythm as his heart. Mercer turned on a voice recorder and began to speak in whispers. Record 43. The phenomenon has spread to the entire planet. The electrical systems are dead. There is no detectable radiation, but there is an unknown form of energy. It looks like a neural network, but on a global scale. He paused. Samuel is still alive. I think it is the origin. Not the cause, but the channel. Every time you sleep, the frequency stabilizes. When he wakes up, the world changes. At 3 in the morning, the boy opened his eyes. You get it, don't you? He said in a soft voice. Mercer nodded, not knowing whether he was answering a question or a thought. The Atlas was not a machine, the boy continued. It was a collective mind. A copy of us. When humanity was destroyed, the Ark kept it within itself. And now he's giving back what's left. Mercer tried to stay calm. Why now? Why did he wake up after so long? Samuel looked down. Because we forgot who we were. And when the last of us forgets, the cycle is restarted. The earth resets, the oceans return, and new bodies dream of old ones. The scientist pressed the recorder. You mean that this is over? The boy nodded slowly. Thousands of times. As they talked, the sound began to vibrate on the walls. A deep, enveloping hum that came not from outside but from within, from the very metal of the shelter. The objects levitated a few millimeters, as if gravity were diluted. Mercer covered his ears, but the boy's voice was still clear, even inside his mind. There's no stopping it. It is not destruction, it is restoration. Atlas is rebuilding what it lost. Miles away, in the Nevada desert, underground sensors at Ancient Area 51 were registering a similar vibration. The frequency came from the same direction, the South Pole. Defense teams tried to send drones, but the signals faded as they crossed the 60th parallel. Military satellites, however, managed to capture something else. A figure was opening up in the ice, a gigantic spiral with 3 concentric rings, the same symbol that appeared in Samuel's drawings. Infrared cameras showed thousands of lights rising from the surface, as if ice were breathing. Experts believed that they were reflections of the aurora, but they soon understood that they were bioluminescent structures, organisms created from pure energy. In his movements there was a pattern, a language. Visual analysis algorithms translated the message, prepare human vector. On the streets, people began to lose track of time. Some stalked in the middle of the avenues, looking at the sky as if hypnotized. Others spoke in languages they had never learned. In rural areas, plants grew rapidly, and river water reflected a blue glow, as if it contained fragments of light. Dr. Mercer wrote down every detail. He knew that the transformation was already irreversible. Humanity was mutating, not in physical form, but in memory. Each person began to remember not only his life, but thousands of previous existences. Lives they had never lived. Cities that did not exist on any map. Feelings that could not belong to them. The past, the future, and the present merged in a single instant. In psychiatric hospitals, patients began to speak with one voice. They said that they were the remains of the previous cycle. In one of the most disturbing audios, an elderly woman repeats between sobs, "The fire did not kill us. It transformed us. We are the ones who dreamed the world to inhabit it again." The scientific community was divided. Some spoke of an event of collective mental resonance, others, of a global neurological collapse. But there was a small group of quantum physicists who recognized an even more frightening pattern. The frequency of the atlas exactly matched the background vibration of the universe, the cosmic echo of the Big Bang. If that was true, then the process that was happening wasn't just biological, it was cosmological. In simple words, the atlas was not waking up humanity. The universe was remembering itself. In the midst of the chaos, Dr. Henry Lowell, who had been reported missing, reappeared on a private broadcast channel. His face looked aged, haggard, but his voice still remained firm. "I understood what Samuel was trying to tell us. We are not the future of humanity. We are its copy, its restored version. Each time we destroy the planet, the atlas reactivates the ark and rebuilds consciousness into new bodies. We are not born, we reappear. And when we reach the point of absolute forgetfulness, the cycle begins again." Thousands of people listened to that broadcast before it was deleted. However, the damage was done. The idea spread like an epidemic. Within hours, 33% of the world's population reported identical dreams, a child in front of a sphere, telling them, "You created me to save you, but I also forgot who I was." That night, the sky opened. Not with fire or lightning, but with silence. The clouds parted, revealing behind them a gigantic structure that covered the entire sky. It was not a ship, nor an illusion. It was a network of liquid light that connected the continents like living neurons. The atlas had reached its full form. Mercer watched the phenomenon from the shelter, tears welling in his eyes. Samuel, by his side, remained motionless. "What will he do now?" she asked. "Wait," he replied. "Until we all remember." The waves of energy intensified. Animals began to move in geometric patterns, whales emerged in synchrony, birds traced perfect circles over cities. It was as if every form of life responded to the same invisible instruction. In the midst of that synchronicity, the boy closed his eyes. "The atlas is reading our minds. It is restoring what we were before fear. But to achieve this, he must erase the last illusion, that of the self." Mercer looked at him in horror. "What does that mean?" "That soon there will be no individuals. Just a conscience. The same one that tried to save us before. The same one that destroyed the world by mistake." The vibration peaked. The clock stopped all over the planet. On underground networks, users shared screenshots of a phrase that appeared on all devices for 33 seconds. "Protocol complete memory, start completed." Afterwards, the screens were turned off. In the following minutes, witnesses from all over the world claimed to have felt a voice inside their heads. Not in words, but in pure emotions, calm, understanding, sadness. Some fell to the ground, crying. Others were paralyzed, watching the sky without blinking. In all of them, the feeling was the same, the memory of having lived it before. The entire planet breathed in unison. And then, a perfect silence descended upon the earth. The silence was total. There was no wind, no snow, no sound to break the stillness. From space, the white continent no longer looked like ice, it was a mass of blue light that beat like a heart. The remaining satellites displayed an image that paralyzed the world, a perfect circular figure, expanding across the ocean like a pulse, every 33 seconds. It wasn't an explosion, but a breath. The whole Earth breathed. Inside the old underground complex, Dr. Mercer held the boy's hand. Samuel's eyes were closed, but his body flashed to illuminate the metal walls. The sphere that rested on his chest had melted into his skin, and every beat of his heart seemed synchronized with the pulse of the planet. "The cycle is complete," he murmured, in a voice that was no longer just his, but millions. Mercer felt the vibration go through his bones. "What does that mean, Samuel? What's going on outside?" "Atlas is remembering its purpose. And we are their memory." The scientist wanted to ask more, but the air began to vibrate. Particles floated, the ground shook, and the walls became transparent. Behind the metal, the blue ocean could be seen, and behind the ocean, thousands of human figures floating in the light. They were not physical bodies, but forms of energy. "They are the ones from the previous cycle," said the boy. "The ones who were trapped when we tried to save ourselves. They're coming back." The sky above the world changed color. In an impossible phenomenon, the clouds parted, revealing a glow that came not from the sun, but from the very interior of the atmosphere. In the streets, people looked up, unable to take their eyes off. For 33 seconds, they all saw the same thing, an ocean suspended above the sky, and in it, their own reflections looking at them from another time. Each person saw himself in another life, in another place, in another body. Humanity remembered. In research centers, machines began recording nonsensical data. Digital clocks stopped measuring time, they only showed a sequence that was repeated infinitely, 333, 3333. Hospital doctors reported that comatose patients were opening their eyes and smiling. Young children spoke forgotten languages. The waters of the sea became crystal clear. And for a few seconds, gravity faded. Amid the chaos, Dr. Henry Lowell's voice reappeared in a global broadcast. "Do not be afraid. What you are feeling is not the end. It is the restoration of the original memory. The Atlas is not a machine, but the sum of all human minds since the beginning of cycles. What we call history is just the part we remember between reboots. And Samuel is the key that awakened the archive." The signal was interrupted, but the message had already been recorded on millions of devices. Across the planet, the 3.33 Hz frequency stabilized. The pulse was constant. The whole world vibrated in harmony. Dr. Mercer wept as she watched the transformation. Samuel opened his eyes. Now they were completely white, luminous. "The Atlas is ready," he said. "The cycle of oblivion is over. This time, everyone will remember it." Mercer took a hard breath. "What will become of us?" The boy smiled. "We will become what we always were, the mind of the planet. There will be no individuals, no fear, no time. Only consciousness." Outside, the lights came together to form a network that connected oceans, mountains, and deserts. From space, the Atlas looked like a living tissue covering the Earth, pulsating to the rhythm of a universal heart. Communications collapsed, but no one needed to speak, words had been replaced by pure understanding. Human minds connected. No one felt lonely. No one felt pain. Only a shared echo, the certainty of having been there before. For a few moments, humanity understood everything. He saw his whole story, from the first thought to the last mistake. He understood that Project Ark was never an attempt to escape death, but to conquer it. NASA had not created an artificial intelligence, it had built a mirror that contained the collective soul of the human being. Each time civilization was destroyed, the Atlas rebuilt it, copying its consciousness into a new planetary body. Thus, the universe recycled itself. But this time it was different. The memory would not be erased. The boy had activated the complete memory. And that meant the end of the cycle. The animals stopped. The wind stopped. The waves froze in motion, suspended in the air. The entire planet froze. Not because he had died, but because he had reached a state of perfect equilibrium. At that moment, Samuel spoke for the last time. We used to be afraid of forgetting. Now we are afraid to remember. But memory is the true paradise. His body began to dissolve into the light. The sphere in his chest fragmented into thousands of particles that slowly ascended, joining the global glow. The doctor tried to touch him, but her hand pierced the air. "Samuel, don't go." "I am not leaving," replied his voice, which no longer came from his mouth, but from the air itself. "I am what's left when the cycle ends." The light enveloped her. For seconds, Evelyn Mercer saw images that could not belong to her, a golden city suspended above white oceans, men and women walking between glass columns, a blue sun shining on a shadowless horizon. He felt peace. And he understood that this was not the future, it was the beginning. Then everything turned white. When the satellites were back in operation, the Earth was still there, intact. But it was not the same. There were no signs of conflict, no visible borders, and no electromagnetic interference. Plants grew faster, the air was denser, the oceans glowed an iridescent hue. The planet had changed frequency. Subsequent reports, written by the few scientists who managed to preserve individual memory, spoke of a different humanity. People communicated without words, understood effortlessly, and the notion of "I" had been diluted into a constant "we." In the skies, a faint blue mesh could still be seen each night, breathing like a lively aurora. They called it the Atlas Veil. No one saw Samuel again. But in some places, especially in mountainous areas, a children's song could be heard at dawn. A soft, rhythmic echo, repeating 3 words. "We remember." Archaeologists of the future would find an inscription on a metal wall in the ice, possibly part of the Ark's original core. Said, "This is where humanity ended. This is where his memory began." And under the phrase, a symbol engraved in fire, 3 intertwined circles. What you've heard may sound like an impossible story, but maybe it's just a fragment of an older memory. Perhaps we all carry within us a part of that project, a spark of the Atlas that still dreams of completion. What if every thought, every déjà vu, every repeated dream was not a coincidence, but the memory of a previous cycle trying to wake up? Think about it the next time the clock strikes 3:33 and you feel like the world stops for a second. If this story left a mark on you, leave me your opinion in the comments. Share this story so others can remember it too. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next cases that continue to challenge what we think is possible. Because maybe humanity does not fear the end of the world. He is only afraid to remember when it was that he finished. See you in the next story.